Okay. Welcome everybody to this webinar. This is Conversations on Fair Trade Fashion, hosted in joint partnership by Live to Free and by Soroptimus. We're very excited to be working with Soroptimus on this project. So my name is Allie Hurst. I am the president of Live to Free this year. So I'm going to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what Live to Free does, and then I'll pass it on to Dawn Marie, who is one of our Soroptimist representatives tonight. As I said, I am the president of Live to Free, and Live to Free is a student mobilization group through Vanguard University on campus, and we work to get students involved in anti-trafficking efforts and causes and events and networking with the anti-trafficking community. So some of the things that we do include planning events like this one, although usually we are on campus or in person, so this is a little different from normal. And we also, in non-pandemic times, go into churches and high schools and other areas of the community, and we teach about what vulnerability looks like and what you can do to stop it. So that's a little bit about what Live to Free does. Now I'm going to pass it on to Dawn Marie. Dawn Marie, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Soroptimist.
Yes, well, I'll talk about, so I'm a member of SI, Soroptimist International, Newport Harbor area. And tonight we actually have two clubs that are helping be sponsors of this. So we're very, very thrilled. The other one is SI Huntington Beach, and she's that club is represented by Mary Chiappetta tonight. We're a worldwide international organization that works through education to empower and provide enabling opportunities for women and girls in 3,000 communities in 121 countries, and we're almost 100 years old. Not us individually, but our organization. Both of our local clubs have been thrilled to be partners with Vanguard and with Live to Free for many of the past years. And our international work with human trafficking actually began in 1995 in Thailand. And since then, around the world, Soroptimists have participated and partnered and created projects that help deal with this dreadful issue. I've been a member since 1982, so I am almost 100, and had the privilege of serving locally and internationally in many different capacities over the past 38 years. I'm privileged to serve on the Community Advisory Council for the Global Center for Women and Justice. And thank you, Allie and Live to Free, for inviting us to be your partners, because we've been having a blast. So take it away.
Wonderful, thank you. In just a minute, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, but before I do that, I wanted to explain that one of the wonderful benefits of partnering with Soroptimist this year is that they have enabled Live to Free to give away what we're calling fair trade in a box giveaways. And so what that means is that we have a whole assortment of fair trade goods and products and resources, information. And if you are one of the 2 attendees or participants in this webinar that is chosen to win a fair trade in a box giveaway, you'll receive one of these boxes that's just stuffed. And I have a couple of examples of things that we might put in there. So you'll be thrilled to know, and this is probably my favorite because I'm a little bit of a coffee addict, Fair Trade Long Beach has given us fair trade coffee to include in these fair trade in a box goodie bags, basically. And I'm thrilled. They have a really good roast. It's absolutely delicious. We also have a whole assortment of jewelry from Purpose Jewelry, which Alexandra knows all about tonight. And we have bags from the Shop with a Mission cause, and it's a whole bunch of stuff just like that, not to mention the different resources and information we'll be shoving in with that. So if you would like to enter for a chance to win one of our Fair Trade in a Box giveaways, you have 2 options tonight. You can go to the chat and you can just enter your name in there, very simple. Or if you're here anonymously today, you're welcome to go to the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen and put your name in there, where only myself and the panelists can see who you are. But that still allows you to enter for an opportunity to win one of our Fair Trade in a Box goodie bags, our prizes. And at the end of the webinar, I'll announce the 2 random winners, and we'll get in contact with you to send it. So I'm really excited. Now I'm going to pass it on to our panelists. I'll call you one by one. We'll go down the line and we'll give you a minute or two to introduce who you are, the organization you work with, and what you're doing for anti-trafficking. So this is a brief summary. You'll have some more time to go into it with the questions that we ask you. But for now, let's start with Cindy. Cindy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Cindy Islas. I'm a case manager with the Salvation Army's anti-trafficking program in Orange County. Our program has kind of grown recently. I personally work with our foreign-born survivors of trafficking, most of which are labor trafficked. And most of my clients end up or turn out to be undocumented. So a big part of what we do is we assist them in getting connected with legal services and obtaining some kind of immigration relief that is related to trafficking, specifically through a T visa. We also have an amazing housing program for our foreign-born survivors. It's called the Guest House, where they're able to live rent-free, basically, until they're able to obtain immigration relief and a legal form of employment, a work permit. About a year and a half ago, we opened up a safe home for for American-born survivors of sex trafficking in the transitional age youth, so from 18 to 25. Unfortunately, we had to close that due to COVID, but hoping to be able to pick that up and open that up again, crossing our fingers for January. And so that we can provide some services and case management for American-born survivors as well.
That is absolutely fabulous. We are thrilled to have you here, Cindy. Thank you so much. Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Skyles. I live in Los Angeles and am a volunteer on the board of directors for Fair Trade Los Angeles. And I'm just honored to be invited to this because I am a Vanguard alum, was involved with Live to Free as a member and also as the student president. So it's really neat to continue the tradition. And you may be familiar with the Fair Trade LA director, Alicia Chan, as she's been involved several years now at the Fair Trade Fashion Show. So I am here to represent Fair Trade LA.
And we are thrilled to have you. We always love working with Fair Trade LA. Alexandra, would you like to go next?
Everyone, thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Alexandra Beatty, and I'm the communications coordinator for Purpose Jewelry, which is the social enterprise of International Sanctuary. Our mission is to empower survivors of human trafficking, and we do that through employment, education, healthcare, and community in our sanctuaries around the world. We are thrilled to work with survivors here in Orange County since 2009, providing them with ethical jobs and opportunities for their future.
We love International Sanctuary and Purpose Jewelry, as you have probably guessed, since I just pulled out like 3 different, jewelry examples, and we have tons more. I have them in all over my living room. My dog keeps trying to get a hold of them, so I've had to stuff them away. So we love Purpose Jewelry. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here. Blythe, would you introduce yourself last but not least?
Absolutely. I'm Blythe Hill. I'm the CEO and founder of the Dressembr Foundation. We are an anti-human trafficking nonprofit organization. We host an annual campaign where thousands of people commit to wearing a dress or a tie every day during the month of December as a way to start conversations and raise awareness and raise money for anti-trafficking work across the US and across the world. And we have been doing this since 2013, and since then, in the last 7 years, we've been able to raise over $10 million collectively, cumulatively. So it's a really fun and easy way for even a very busy person to engage in this issue and make a tangible impact.
Wonderful.
That is fantastic. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for being willing to work with us and talk about these issues in a way where we can break it down so that someone who's completely unfamiliar with it will hopefully, leave our webinar tonight understanding the issues and understanding what's going on. So we're going to dive right in because we have a lot of material and questions to get into and very little time. So I'm going to start with Brittany. Brittany, I have to be honest, I feel like I have a bit of a connection with you because we're both Live to Free presidents and you graduated from Vanguard. So I've never met you in person, but I already love you and feel like we're great friends.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to reconnect.
Absolutely. I'm going to start with a couple of questions that we've prepared for you. So first of all, Brittany, can you tell us what is fair trade?
Okay, well, people describe it in various different ways, but I like to describe fair trade as a belief, a certification, and a movement, because it really does encompass various different aspects of how we live in our worldview of ethical consumerism. So as a belief, fair trade is the belief that everyone should be paid fair wages for the work they do and working in ethical conditions so that they're not being exploited. As a certification, so there's certifiers like Fair Trade USA, Fair Trade America, Fair for Life that are third parties to companies, and they are certifying that these companies are have clean and transparent supply chains so that there are no exploitations. And that certification tells us as consumers that these really are fair trade products, so we can trust the system and there's no exploitation that's gone into these products. And then as a movement, it's all about people like you and I who are passionate about what's on the other side of products, the food we are eating, the clothes we're wearing. We know that there's people behind that, and we are choosing to vote with our dollars. As my pin says, I voted with my dollar to make a difference in the world for those people and not support the alternative, which may include exploitation.
Wow. That was a fantastic summary of what fair trade is. So you mentioned exploitation, and I want to ask you, what is the link between human trafficking and fair trade?
Yeah, so when people hear human trafficking, a lot of different things can come to mind to the general public, but often it's sex trafficking, and that does get a lot of attention. But with fair trade, we're really using this as a platform to avoid or prevent labor trafficking. So when it in factories, when there's a fair trade factory, we know that those employees are not being exploited and being used as labor trafficking victims. So they could be victimized as labor trafficking by having their documents taken away from them, being forced to work, or just being paid way under a fair, living, sustainable wage and being exploited for their value without being compensated appropriately. So this happens in agriculture as well. California is a big state for agriculture, and labor trafficking is very common in that field. I mentioned factory workers around the world. There's different ways, child soldiers. There's lots of ways for exploitation, which Live to Free covers great information on that. But labor trafficking is huge, massive in numbers, millions of people around the world. So as I was trying to explain, fair trade is one way where we just can be confident in our purchases that we're not perpetuating the cycle of labor trafficking.
Very interesting, very heavy topics. I wanted to ask you on a more personal note here. In your experience, what kind of positive results have you seen from fair trade?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is hearing and reading stories and reading the mission statements behind the companies that I choose to shop with or from. But I have had a personal experience where I was able to travel to Kenya and visit a fair trade jewelry company where they were employing artisans to make fair trade jewelry, meaning that all the artisans were being paid fairly, have a place to work in, that it wasn't luxurious by any means. It was in part of the very impoverished area of the city, but they were safe and they were being managed well and they were being paid fairly. So firsthand, I got to sit with these artisans, and they were actually all men, which is somewhat maybe uncommon, whereas many companies employ women and empower women, which is amazing. But in this case, it was men, and they needed those living wages to be able to support their family. So one of the artisans was sharing his story about how his wages allowed for providing for his children and his wife, but actually to empower his wife to start her own business. And she was able to provide another income just because of the stability of his wages compared to other people in their area in this very poor town. So that really moved me. I got to take a peek behind the scenes, pull back the curtain a little bit of what it looks like, in this case in a third world country, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Yes, I'm so glad that you had a story to kind of a personal experience to kind of make what we're talking about a little more real and a little more tangible for our listeners. So thank you for that. As I mentioned, I have kind of a special connection with you. We're both from Live to Free, and I'm really wondering, how did your experiences with Live to Free prepare you to work with fair trade?
Live to Free was my starting point. Before that, I did not know what the term meant at all. So as a young adult, having exposure to this kind of very valuable training at the level that Live to Free offered, when I came into it, there was material already there. And then, as you know, the team each year develops that and can make it better. So I learned first, and then I was able to become active and an advocate and use my voice with what I knew. But it was really just breaking that barrier of ignorance and unknowing and not being exposed in my childhood or not ever being told these harsh realities before. And then just feeling so empowered that I could do something about it. And that outlet was fair trade because it's tangible. And often it feels like maybe we don't think we can do anything. It's so overwhelming. But in this case, when you can go to your local grocery store and actually have some fun trying to identify labels and go on a little treasure hunt to feel like my extra few dollars or cents or whatever the difference is at the grocery store or at my clothing stores is actually making a difference. And that's very empowering as a person in America of privilege and wealth, just a way that felt tangible in that moment and still does today, and makes me excited about that.
That's wonderful. You know, we work so hard at Live to Free to empower people. I love that that was one of the first terms that came to your mind, that Live to Free empowered you. So that's the work we're trying to do. Dawn Marie, Brittany mentioned multiple times the term labor trafficking. So I'm wondering, do you know what that means?
Well, I kind of have a sense of it, but I bet Cindy Islas can really help us with that. So let's have her tell us what labor trafficking is so we can have a foundation for the next part of our discussion. And then we'll come back to her later after we've had some other input. So Cindy, what is labor trafficking?
I'm glad you asked that. So in our program, we use the federal definition of labor trafficking, and in doing so, we use the A&P model. A meaning action, M meaning mode, and P meaning purpose. So there has to be one aspect of each for it to be labor trafficking. So action would be like recruiting, transporting, obtaining a person through force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of gaining some kind of economic gain for labor trafficking through some kind of labor, right? So the key in labor trafficking is that force, fraud, or coercion. If there isn't any force, fraud, or coercion, then we can't really call it trafficking. It may be labor exploitation, but not necessarily trafficking. So there could be instances where people are not being paid overtime, don't receive breaks or long enough lunch breaks, are overworked or poor working conditions, but there is no sense of force to be in that situation or coercion to be in that situation. Then that would be called exploitation, and that's something that maybe like the Department of Labor would become involved to kind of fix those things. It's when there's things like threats to the safety of oneself or maybe their family. Especially for my clients specifically, a big theme is being threatened with deportation or being reported to immigration. Fraud is also kind of a big one. I have a good group of clients who are recruited in their home countries and promised through like an international work organization that they'd come here to the US and work under a certain amount of money an hour, but then once they actually arrive to the United States, it's a completely different thing. It's not the $9 an hour or whatever it is that they were promised. However many boxes of grapes you picked that day, which looks completely different. So that could be the fraud piece. Force is they're physically forced. I've had clients who were forced to live in storage rooms at the back of a restaurant. So things like those kind of situations. Just to give you kind of an example between the two, or another example is I have a client who was trafficked. She was forced to work for somebody, and all of that woman took all of her wages. Now she has escaped that situation, thankfully, and she is now working as a live-in nanny. The amount of money that she receives is definitely not the amount of money that she should be receiving under legal standards. She definitely should be receiving a lot more. However, because she's undocumented, she feels like she doesn't have a whole lot of options. And her family back home in her home country depend a lot on her and the money that she does make. So she stays there. She chooses to stay there. And I have even offered our guest house to her, like, you can come and live in our program. But sometimes, what we want for our clients is not necessarily what they want. So we allow them to choose that for them. Obviously, they've come from a place where that control has been taken away from them. So if she needs to stay in that situation or wants to stay in that situation to be able to support her family in her home country, then that's her choice. She's being exploited. She's aware of that. We've had that conversation. But unfortunately, in that situation, it wouldn't be crossing over to trafficking because there isn't that force, fraud, or coercion.
These stories that you're giving are so powerful, and they really bring it personally to it. What is you used an acronym, AMP?
AMP.
And could you define each of A and P?
A as in action.
Yes.
M as in mode, and purpose. P as in purpose. Okay.
I just haven't heard that before, and I think that's really important. So since this has been, kind of a fashion show time that Live to Free does annually, we have to bring in fashion to this question. So in your opinion, why do you think that, why does it seem that the fashion industry is such a hotspot for trafficking and exploitation?
Well, I feel like with any kind of trafficking, there's a supply and demand. So as long as there's a demand for cheap products, for cheap clothing, fast fashion, plays a lot into that, then there's going to be some kind of supply for that. So the need for cheap clothing is going to fall back onto the companies producing that and finding whatever way they can to be able to produce these products as cost effective as possible. And that creates a lot of vulnerability to trafficking. I think for also the fashion industry, there's just several levels involved. So it can go from picking the cotton to assembling the product in a factory to shipping it to the United States. So there's several areas within the industry where trafficking could occur, and I'm sure it does. And there's also a lack of supply chain transparency. So companies aren't very open about where, like all those areas where everything comes from, and not just where, but the conditions of how that product is produced. So the working conditions of those people picking the cotton, or and the factory that sews the garments together. There isn't enough information. They're not transparent about that information of the working conditions, if they're being paid a living wage, if they're working in a reasonable amount of hours, and in a situation that's in a healthy, safe working conditions.
Well, thank you, Cindy. We are going to come back to you in a few minutes. And I just want to remind or let all the listeners, attendees know that I am sure you're thinking of a ton of questions right now. So there is a Q&A box on your screen, and we just would love to get your questions. We want you to leave having found out what you needed to know. So Allie, you're going to talk to Blythe.
I am. So Cindy mentioned, the fashion industry and all the ways that the supply and demand system can impact labor trafficking. So Blythe, I want to turn to you for a second, because you founded Dressembr, and ask you, first of all, how is Dressembr connected to fair trade, our kind of overarching theme of the night?
Yeah, so Dressembr, being a fashion-driven challenge, or our sort of bread and butter campaign is so fashion-driven, it became apparent to me early on, as far back as 2013, our first campaign year, that there is this overlap between the apparel industry and labor trafficking. And I remember someone I think tweeted at Dressembr and said, like, are you encouraging people to buy ethically made or fair trade dresses? Because if not, this campaign has this unfortunate irony to it, that here we are fighting trafficking in our clothing that's potentially made by trafficked people. So that really struck me from the beginning. And I'll admit it was new to me. And it became really important from that point on. Okay, we need to partner with ethical brands. We need to partner with fair trade brands. If I don't know much about this, I need to do a ton of research on it, and really, we see our role as not only providing this tangible entry point for people, but also providing resources and education and a language around this issue. And so it became, just important early on that we not only support ethical brands, partner with fair trade brands, but point our people, our growing community of people who are interested in this issue, first explaining that overlap, that it exists, and then also pointing them towards brands that they can feel great about supporting. And actually, about 2 years ago, we launched a directory, an ethical brand directory that people can search. It's over 400 brands. You can search by category or price point. And we love fair trade, especially because, of course, the certifications are there, but we also have non-fair trade, but self-proclaimed ethical brands that are transparent with who makes their products as well.
That's fantastic. I didn't know about the directory. I want to look into that. that sounds like such a fantastic resource. So I want to ask you kind of a quick question to touch on. What kind of an impact can ethically sourced fashion brands have on the market?
I did not mute myself, but I was muted. I think brands can have a huge impact because, again, there's a supply and demand issue here. And I think there is increasing awareness and there is increasing desire from consumers to know that the people who make their clothing are paid fairly and treated fairly and aren't children and aren't working in terrible conditions. So I remember, again, back in 2013, when I was looking for brands to partner with, there weren't very many that I could find. And the ones that there were, I mean, bless their hearts, but they were, not very like trendy. They weren't produced. It felt like charity. It felt like, okay, I'll buy these paper beads because I know it goes to a good cause. And now we have to like really limit our partnerships at Dressembr because there are so many amazing brands producing really beautiful products. It's almost like amazing that in even 7 years, so many brands have stepped up to fill that void. And then seeing some of these bigger brands follow suit and kind of try these capsule fair trade collections to dip their toes in the water. I think, we on the consumer side have a lot of power. As Brittany was saying, like every dollar we spend really does cast a vote.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our takeaway from this as a consumer, why would you say it's important for us to learn about human trafficking then in relation to this whole topic of fair trade?
Yeah, I entered the fair trade conversation through human trafficking, but there are people who like are just beautiful, benevolent people that come through the fair trade angle and maybe don't know about human trafficking. And I think it's just important to know what's going on and what's potentially at risk and the potential exploitation behind products, and really reinforce your decision to know who's making the items that you buy, and then also be able to encourage others to investigate that as well. Yeah, there was something else I was going to say, but I kind of lost my train of thought there.
No problem. We'll probably come back to you when we get to our question and answer segment. So I want to thank you for all those great answers. And to kind of build upon that, I'll pass it back on to Dawn Marie, who has some questions for Alexandra.
So Alexandra, I said, I want to talk to Alexandra because both of our Soroptimist clubs have been quite interested and involved with you. And now I've got my church to be involved with you as well. So what does supporting Purpose Jewelry do for ending human trafficking and empowering women?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we as an organization employ survivors of human trafficking around the world. And through our program, jewelry came naturally. When our founder started in 2007, Stephanie went to India and she's going through the aftercare homes and she's like, what can I do? What can I actually do to help these girls and make a lasting impact in their lives? And there's all these incredible organizations doing rescue and getting the girls out, but the systematic inequalities of poverty, gaps in education, abuse that made women vulnerable and girls vulnerable to trafficking in the first place are still plaguing them. And so if girls can't overcome these inequalities that made them so vulnerable, they can't move forward. And so jewelry was a means to give them a job. It was saying, I want you to be able to earn a fair wage. I want you to be able to feel dignified in your work and give you holistic care, but it's not going to be a handout. It's going to be help. It's going to be you come in every day and maybe you don't come in some days and you don't get paid those days. That's a job. But we're not going to fire you. We're going to talk to you. We're going to teach you how to grow from this. And so it's all about empowering them. And they have that decision to not come in. They have that decision to do what they want with their life, good or bad, but we're there to walk alongside them, to not tell them what to do, but to tell them, you have this opportunity and you don't have to be beholden to your past. Your past does not define you. And for the first time to see them say, okay, I can save, I can go to college. I have these dreams for myself for the first time. I know we recently shared a story in our annual report about one of our young survivors in Mexico. And when she joined us, it was like, yeah, I just need to get food on my table for my son. I don't want to interact. I don't want to really be here, but I need money and you guys pay well and you're going to, not take advantage of me. So I'm going to work here and that's it. And it took about a year for her to open up. And then suddenly when she was watching the sanctuary grow itself, we actually moved the sanctuary closer to where she was and we were able to bring more girls in. And as she saw more girls working alongside her, it was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I do care about myself. Maybe I do have opportunities. And now she's enrolled in nursing school. So she's working with us part-time. She's going to nursing school. And these opportunities are just invaluable because they're saying, you have an opportunity, you can dream. And so when you purchase Purpose Jewelry, you are buying the product that Maria in Mexico is making or Anisha in India was making. And you're saying, I want to support your journey. And when I wear my piece of Purpose Jewelry, I'm supporting you building your dream in your future.
Wow. That's a story. And that's real. So that's a story we can take Maria in our hearts with us. And that's what we need to do is understand the person behind the product, right? And then it makes us part of the solution as well. So I'm going to slip to the very last question I have for you, which is about sanctuaries, specifically in California. Just tell us how it works. You've given a little bit window into it, but tell us more about the day-to-day work and that, how somebody comes to you and so forth.
Yeah, so we actually work with amazing partners like Cindy at Salvation Army and Waymakers here in Orange County. And we actually started back in 2009 in partnership with the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. And we had already been working in India for 2 years. And it was kind of like, okay, wait, this problem is here too. We can't just work overseas while we know that women are being exploited here, men are being exploited here. And so opening up in Orange County was the next step. And so it started with fulfillment. So we had the girls in India making jewelry, and then here in Orange County, they're receiving the jewelry, they're quality controlling, they're packing it, they're fulfilling the orders. So it's this full circle of our supply chain where girls are interacting in every single level. And then it was about 2 years ago that we knew that we needed to take our program to the next level. So working with our partners, we said, okay, we need to do more for American survivors. We had worked predominantly with international survivors, labor trafficking survivors. And so we knew we wanted to work more, have a program specialized for American survivors. And so when we opened that program, everyone said, all right, 3 months max. Like, it's so expensive here. Girls can't stay here. They don't want to stay here. Just help them get on their feet and get them out the door. That's what we need. And 3 months in, we've got girls coming up to us, I actually just started going to college here in Orange County, or, I actually really have friends here for the first time. I don't want to leave. Can I stay? It became, okay, how do we move beyond this? And I think what's important, our program is on pause right now because of the shutdown. And what's important, even more magnified right now, is knowing that our program never has been the end point. It's about, we are here to get you through to the next step, but what is next? And so the power of fair trade and buying fair trade in your community is that you're saying, okay, we're going to buy from Purpose today and we're going to help the girls as they get on their feet. But next, I need to be able to say, hey, when she graduates from our program, she needs to go somewhere else and she needs to be able to go to a fair working environment. We need to know that the rest of our organizations in our community are also providing these fair, ethical workplaces, because if they're not, there's nowhere else to go. So we need to create a place in society where survivors can move forward and not just stay in the aftercare programs and in the next step programs. They need to be able to move on in their careers.
Wonderful. Oh gosh. Oh, I could just talk and talk to you. So, but we're going to go back to Cindy because we have more questions to ask, don't we, Allie?
We absolutely do. I want to kind of build off of your experience working directly with the trafficking survivors, Cindy, and ask you, can you describe the importance of safe working conditions from the perspective of working with the trafficking victims and survivors?
Sure. I think it really comes down to it being just a basic human right. We all want to live in a place that we feel safe and we feel supported. And for our survivors who escape a really difficult situation and are able to find a safe place like that to work in, it really brings them a lot of dignity. They feel like their self-worth definitely increases. They feel like they're much more worthy than what they had previously thought of or experienced in the past. So it really brings a lot of dignity, and in turn, it can boost self-confidence, boost overall mental health. So it's very important to them, especially when maybe in the past all they've known is this really scary type of work environment, and seeing something different, knowing that they can receive something different and that they deserve something different, is very important.
Yeah. I love that you used the term human right. I love to talk about human rights in my classes. I think that it's such an important issue to be aware of and get involved in. And that's part of what we do here in anti-trafficking communities and in fair trade communities. We focus on human rights. So I thank you for bringing that up. I have one last question for you, and I'm going to talk about thrift stores, but I know that you don't work directly with the Salvation Army thrift stores. It's separate departments, right, that deal with the thrift stores. But I want to ask you all the same. How do you think thrift stores and thrift shopping benefit anti-human trafficking organizations?
So yeah, just like as you said, there are Salvation Army family stores out there, and there are thrift stores. It is a social enterprise model, so the profits that come from those thrift stores go back to the adult rehabilitation centers that Salvation Army runs. So just using that social enterprise model, any type of social enterprise can use that model to develop profit, the funds to be able to run like an anti-trafficking program, let's say. So it's been beneficial for the Adult Rehabilitation Center for Salvation Army, something that can definitely be transferred over to something like an anti-trafficking program. For us specifically, for our program, we can still take a little advantage of the thrift store. So we are able to give vouchers to our clients so they can shop at the thrift stores, so they're able to benefit from that as well. And I think in general, thrift stores just allow you to kind of recycle those products, so that it lowers the demand for the cheap clothing to continue to be made. If there's already cheap clothing out there to buy in a thrift store, and if people continue to purchase that, then the supply would lessen. The demand would lessen, then therefore the supply would lessen, and the potential for trafficking would lessen. But of course, that's all in theory.
Yeah, you have to follow that train of thought, right? The supply, the demand. Yeah, but thank you. Those are the questions that we had prepared for our panelists. And before we move on to audience questions or, our more general questions or topics, I just want to thank you all so much for being willing to come and answer our questions and to give your input and tell your stories. I think this has already been fabulous, and we still have a couple more minutes left to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Marie and Mary, and they're going to address some questions that maybe have come through from the audience.
I'm sorry, I meant to mention this earlier. I misspoke earlier when I was talking about the AMP model. I think for M, I said mode, but it's actually means. I'm not sure what happened in my brain there, but. So A is action, M is means, and P is purpose. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but wanted to correct that.
It's okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. The academic in me wants to be like taking really close notes, but then I'd get distracted and I would like forget to ask you the questions we've already prepared. So I'm trying to kind of multitask. So yes, thank you for clarifying, because I'm filing it all back away. I'm still in college, so I'm in that class mode if I might be tested on this later.
Well, we have some questions from the audience. Do you want to read them for us, please?
Sure. The first one, we've got two questions. The first one's from Islas. What are some strategies for us as consumers to follow to ensure we are shopping from ethical companies? And to follow up on that, if a company mentions on their website that they have ethical production, but are not fully transparent or specific, is this something to be wary of?
So, who would like to take this on? Brittany or Mayor or Blythe? Who would like to answer these questions for us?
Well, I love that Blythe mentioned shopping guides, because there's a lot of that already done for us as consumers that we can Google, we can research ourselves and find work that's already been done by either fair trade certifications or just general ethical companies. And yes, everything is a trust game, whether how much you're going to trust mission statement of a company. And unfortunately, there is a lot of greenwashing or things that sound great that maybe aren't as great as we hope they are. So it's good to be skeptical. It's good to ask as a consumer to dig deeper and challenge those companies. And we always have the right to do that. And we can email them and press them a little bit. But as far as my route and the things I do is trust the guides. And that's been great and just alleviate some of the hours that I would have spent researching on my own.
I remember Sandy Morgan gave the name of one, Sweat and Labor, I think it is, or Sweat and Toil.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yep.
a really good.
I believe that's an app.
That's an app, right? Which is I've taken into stores. It's really fun. So Blythe, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Brittany said, and would just piggyback on it that we love Fashion Revolution at Dressembr. They come out with an annual index where they rate the top 200 brands globally. None of them score perfectly, but it's this like, hey, we're watching you, and some of these brands are making efforts to get better. And as with most things when you're dealing with humans and dollars, you have to walk a delicate dance between sort of shaming them and praising them for the steps that they're taking. But there are a lot of brands that are taking those steps, and yeah, and Fashion Revolution also has great tools where you can directly email. They have templates, and you can email brands through their site just to put additional pressure on them as a consumer, which you have a lot of power with those brands to do.
You know, I love you saying that. You know, how many studies have we read about the power of purchasing clothing, especially for women, the amount of money we control, and we don't exercise it enough, I think. So being knowledgeable is a good first start, right? So Mary, we have one other question.
Yes, we do, from Carrie. And the question is, are goods such as clothing that say they were made in the USA really made in the USA? Is there a way to verify that as a consumer?
So who would like to take that one on? Anybody?
Well, I've never answered this question before, but I'll give it a stab. I mean, if it says made in the USA, I would take that at face value, although maybe that's naive, but usually on websites, good companies will mention where their products are made, factories, or at least cities. And as far as made in the USA, just as a general concept, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's free of exploitation. Here in Los Angeles, we know that there's factories where employees of the factories are paid pennies per item, up to maybe $5 a day, and they can't leave or take breaks as they should. So, and that's here in California and Los Angeles. So made in the USA isn't necessarily just clean across the board, but on the other hand, it's not always bad either. And there's a lot of nuance there. That's probably the extent that I know about it.
Anybody else want to add to that? I think that's a great answer, really. So I think, Allie, we're ready to do our last question because this time has just flown by so fast.
It has, absolutely. I've been having so much fun. I lost track of time multiple times. So that's just, a testament to what a great job all our speakers are doing, engaging us. So we have one last question, Dawn Marie and I, that we would like to pose to each of you. So we want to give all four of you just a short amount of time to address it to the best of your ability, in your own manner. So I'll go in the same order that I called you to introduce yourselves. And honestly, that's just because that's the order you're on your screen. So it helps me keep track. So I'll start with Cindy and I'll say, Cindy, what is the most important point that you want the audience to take away from tonight's conversation?
Well, I really just want people to be more aware of labor trafficking. I'm not sure who said it earlier. I think maybe it was Brittany, that human trafficking in general doesn't get a lot of attention, but when it does, it tends to be through sex trafficking. That seems to be the more exciting topic. Especially here in Orange County. The Salvation Army is part of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, and sex trafficking tends to be highlighted a lot more than labor trafficking. But yet worldwide, labor trafficking is the major issue. I think it's like 88% of human trafficking is labor trafficking. So it's a much bigger issue worldwide, and it's definitely here in Orange County. And I just want people to be aware of how prominent it can be.
Thank you. So there you have it, folks. Cindy's takeaway is just to be aware of labor trafficking and the issue that it is. And I have to 100% agree with her that when I first started working with the anti-human trafficking community, I didn't even know there was a difference between different kinds of trafficking. So that just shows you how little attention it gets. Next, let's go on to Brittany. Brittany, what is the most important point that you would want the audience to take away from tonight's conversation?
Well, I would say if anyone has felt despair or overwhelmed once they learn about the truth and the reality of how things are sometimes made and the cost behind your t-shirt, if you're feeling that frustration or just devastation, there is a great way to channel it into action. And that's the most productive way to deal with those feelings. So you're not too young, you're not too shy or insecure, whatever you're dealing with, to not stand up and to raise your voice and to be an advocate for something better that you believe in. And it's really exciting to find that. So if you are maybe in a place still of learning, give it time, give it patience, and keep digging into the learning. And then just trust yourself with your process of becoming an advocate for something you believe in.
That's fantastic. My dog is making all kinds of noise, so I'm going to talk really quick. Alexandra, what is your takeaway for the audience tonight?
Yeah, my takeaway is that, you know, when you shop fair trade, you're not just telling the world that everyone deserves to be treated fairly, but you're telling the world that it's unacceptable to take advantage of people. And so when you use your purchase, you really are making a vote. You really are telling companies, hey, you need to shape up. You need to step up because we are not okay with you doing this. And you're telling survivors, we're not going to purchase from companies that are doing this. We care about it and we're putting our money towards it and we're standing up for you.
Excellent, as expected. Man, you guys are all doing such a great job tonight. I can't even, later, my mom is going to ask me, like, who is your favorite panelist or something like that, and I won't even have an answer for her. So I appreciate it, but you have made my job harder tonight. Blythe, let's finish off with you. What would be the most important takeaway that you want the audience to walk away with after tonight's conversation?
You know, it's hard to add much because I think some of the takeaways we've already covered are brilliant. I think the only other thing I would add is, you know, to the idea of overwhelm, that, you know, when you first learn about this, it's super overwhelming. You know, I think most of us want to be good people and have a positive impact on other people. And so learning that our purchases could negatively impact people near and far is very overwhelming. So I always encourage people to take baby steps and have grace for yourself. And if you slip up, just get back on the wagon. And, you know, I think thrift stores are a great budget friendly way to shop ethically and with the environment in mind as well, which is awesome. So yeah, there are baby steps you can take. And I don't believe in sort of shaming anyone into this journey. It's a big decision.
Right. Wow, Allie, why didn't we make this a 2-hour event? I'm just
I'm starting to wonder the same thing. I am blown away. I am thrilled that we had this opportunity to talk to you all. And I'm thrilled that Dawn Marie was able to be here and sharing that with me. Her help and the help of the rest of the Soroptimist ladies has been absolutely outstanding. So we're going to wrap it up here. So I want you all to be able to get out if you're on time. And Zoom fatigue is real. I experience that. All of my classes are on Zoom. I'm on Zoom like many hours every day. But I just want to thank you all once again and congratulate our panelists because you are all making an impact and making a difference in people's lives and in the anti-human trafficking cause as a whole. So I want to thank you and congratulate you. Before I announce our Fair Trade in a Box giveaway winners, Dawn Marie, do you have anything to add tonight?
I think that we were all really inspired tonight to learn more. And thank you for saying the word grace. I think we can be overwhelmed with the bad, but the possibility is the opportunity that we have. So learning more and doing our little part. And I love this Dressembr thing. I mean, what a nice little totally human thing that you can do. And that purpose jewelry is so inexpensive, but it's so amazing. So we all can do our part. And that's what I really am pleased with our thank all of you for attending tonight, because we're just really thrilled you are here.
Excellent, as always. I love having Dawn Marie on my team because I'll think I've said anything there is to say, and then she always comes in and has more to add, and it's perfect. We make a great team, Dawn Marie. I hope you know that. I am happy to announce our Fair Trade in a Box giveaway winners. The first one is Angela Winthizer. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I don't actually know, but I did my best. And the second one is Matthew Holgate. And I'll admit up front, I know Matthew, but this was completely by random, so there was no favoritism shown there. So I'm going, yes, if you want to, well, you do want to receive the prize, I'm going to put our email in the chat and then I'll say it out loud a couple of times as well. Just email me your contact information and where you would like the prize shipped to, and we'll get that to you as soon as possible. That our email is L2F at vanguard.edu. And you can email that address if you want to connect, if you want to set up our students coming and speaking as guests, whether that's Zoom or if you're local. I think we're getting to a point where with masks and social distancing, we might be able to organize something in person. But I just want to repeat, that's L2F at vanguard.edu. And thank you so much for coming. Email me for your prizes, Matthew and Angela. You want to get these, they're really cool. And if you didn't win a prize tonight, make sure that you come to our webinars next week, because attendees at our webinars next week will also be getting Fair Trade in a Box giveaway. So our panelists, if you wanted the prize but you weren't eligible because you're a panelist, come to our webinars next week. You'll have your opportunity to get a Fair Trade in a Box prize. Our webinars next week are Tuesday at 6 p.m. and Friday at 1 p.m. And you can find more details about that at Live to Free's Instagram, which is @_Live to Free. Just like it says on my name, the number 2, Live to Free _. So find us on Instagram, find us on social media, come to our next webinars, engage in our challenges, and use this as an opportunity to learn, just like you did while you've been here. Thank you all again. Honestly, God bless you all. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that you were here and we had this opportunity. And I'm going to stop recording and close us out. And